Once upon a time, in the beautiful city of Enugu, there was a man named Udo Okafor, a charming, hardworking, and ambitious accountant in his early 30s. He had a beautiful wife, Nazo. Nazo was a nurse. She had a kind heart and a smile that could warm even the coldest soul. Their love story was one that people envied, built on trust, laughter, and mutual respect. Udo and Nazo met in the university back when he was a broke but determined student and she was studying to become a nurse. Their paths crossed when Nazo accidentally knocked over Udo's stack of books. She had laughed, helped him pick them up, and then, seeing his frustration, offered to carry some of the books for him to the hostel. They had lunch after that day. That lunch had turned into dinner, then into endless conversations, and soon love blossomed. After years of dating, Udo got a job as an accountant in a big company and soon proposed in a most romantic way, renting out a small restaurant where they had their first date and filling it with candle lights. Nazo said yes with tears in her eyes, and a year later, they had the beautiful wedding. Their life together was simple but sweet. They worked hard, built a comfortable home, and dreamed of starting a family. Their marriage was full of warmth. Udo was an attentive husband, always bringing Nazo gifts on random evenings, and she, in return, made sure he never left home without a properly ironed shirt and a warm meal. Life was good, but life, as it always does, had other plans. Life in the Okafor household remained blissful as the months passed. Their love was as strong as ever, but soon something exciting and challenging happened. Naza got pregnant. It was the news they had both been waiting for, and when the pregnancy test showed two bold lines, Nazo screamed with joy. Udo lifted her off her feet, spinning her around despite her protests. "I told you my soldiers are strong," Udo joked, rubbing his palms together like a proud warrior. "Abeg, put me down joor before I vomit on you," Nazo laughed, pushing his chest playfully. The couple basked in the glow of their new reality. Udo was the doting husband, making sure Nazo had everything she needed: midnight cravings, foot massages, and even driving across town for the softest pillow she had once mentioned in passing. Their love deepened, but something else was happening too. A shift Udo hadn't expected. As Nazo's pregnancy progressed, her energy levels dropped. The once vibrant woman who would surprise him with dinner in lingerie was now exhausted. By the sixth month, intimacy had become almost non-existent. "Baby, just hold me tight tonight," she would whisper half asleep whenever Udo tried to initiate something in bed. He understood. Of course, she was carrying their child. But understanding didn't erase his desires. That was when Udo met Jessica. Jessica was a new administrative officer at his workplace, and she was breathtaking. Tall, curvy, with a voice that dripped like honey. From the moment she stepped into the office, every man noticed her. But it wasn't just her beauty, it was her confidence. She worked like she knew the effect she had on people and she enjoyed it. Jessica took a keen interest in Udo. It started with small things: lingering gazes during meetings, light touches when handing him a document, playful comments that made his ears warm. "Ha, Udo, you have the best cologne in this office. If I were your wife, I would never let you out of the house smelling this good," she had once said, her fingers grazing his wrist. Udo laughed it off at first. "Jessica, behave oh, my wife will chase you with a broom if she hears this." But Jessica didn't stop. She found excuses to visit his office, bring him coffee, complimenting his shirts, and asking for his help with tasks she could easily do herself. The real trouble began when she started sending him gifts. At first, it was little things. His favorite energy drink, a neatly wrapped tie. Then one evening, as he was about to leave the office, Jessica stopped him at the door. Udo, wait! I got something special for you. She handed him a bag. Inside it was an expensive designer wristwatch. Ah, Jessica, this is too much, Udo said, frowning. She stepped closer, smiling seductively. No, it's not. You're special, Udo. I just wanted to appreciate you. Just let me. Udo hesitated. Was this a trap? Or was he overthinking it? That night, as he lay beside his pregnant wife, feeling the coldness of her distance, his mind wandered. The temptation had been planted, and soon it would take root. Udo tried to fight the temptation for weeks. He avoided Jessica's flirtations, reminding himself of Nazo, of the unborn child, of the life they had built. But temptation is a persistent beast, and Jessica was relentless. Udo! Ah, why are you acting like a saint? She teased one evening after work, leaning against his office door with that seductive smirk of hers. Are you not a man? A strong, capable man. Eh? You have needs now. And see, I'm here. That night, Udo lay beside Nazo, staring at the ceiling. She was asleep, curled up with her pregnancy pillow, breathing softly. He reached out and brushed his fingers against her arm. Baby, I'm tired, she mumbled, shifting away slightly. Something inside him snapped. He was angry. The next evening, after work, Jessica invited him to her apartment. He hesitated at first. Then, like a man walking towards his own doom, he went. Jessica's apartment smelled of lavender and danger. The moment he stepped in, she wrapped her arms around him, pressing her body against his. Ah, you're tense, baby, she whispered, undoing his tie. Let me help you relax. Udo barely protested. He was already drowning, and he let himself sink. That evening was one of passion, forbidding, intoxicating, and for a brief moment it felt good, until it was time to go. As Udo left Jessica's apartment, whistling to himself, something strange happened. It started with a black cat rushing out from the road, from nowhere. As he walked towards his car, a small thing, but it made his heart tighten. Then on his way home, as he drove through a busy street, he saw her, an old woman crossing the road. He hit the brakes but it was just too late. Thump! A scream and crowd gathered. Udo's heart stomped as he jumped out of the car. The woman lay on the ground, clutching her leg. She was alive but in pain. Then a mob came rushing. You dey see road? Someone shouted. Wicked man! You for kill am na? Before Udo could explain, fists rained down on him. Punches, slaps, kicks. He was beaten mercilessly. By the time the crowd calmed, his face was swollen, his shirt torn, and blood dripped from his nose. You better carry am go hospital, a bystander ordered. Udo, bruised and humiliated, spent the rest of the day at the hospital, paying the woman's medical bills. He spent a ridiculous amount of money. His entire savings for that month was gone. By the time he got home, battered and broke, Nazo screamed at the sight of him. Jesus, Udo, what happened to you? Udo forced a smile. Ah, I just small wahala on the road though, nothing serious. Nazo didn't believe him. Neither did he. That night as he lay in bed, his body aching, a terrifying thought crept into his mind. Was this just bad luck or was there something more? But he shook it off until it happened again. Udo should have learned his lesson. He told himself the beating and the financial loss were just coincidences. After all, accidents happen, and mobs in the city were always quick to deliver jungle justice. But deep down, something gnawed at him, a fear he couldn't explain. For a while, he kept his distance from Jessica. Guilt had a way of sobering up a man. He refocused on Nazo, tending to her needs, being present. But as the weeks passed, His resolve weakened, and Jessica was persistent. "Although I miss you," she texted one evening. He ignored it. The next day at work, she walked into his office unannounced, closing the door behind her and leaned against it. "Udo, are you avoiding me?" Her voice was low, almost a whisper, but laced with mischief. "Jessica, abeg, not today," Udo muttered, rubbing his temple. But she walked closer, placed a delicate hand on his chest and looked up at him through long lashes. "Come on, baby," she purred. "I promise this time will even be better than last time." Udo swallowed hard. The way she looked at him, the way she smelled, the way his body ached. He was a man, a weak, foolish man. And so he fell again. This time he convinced himself that the last time was just an unfortunate coincidence. This time things would be different. But he was so wrong. That evening, as Udo left Jessica's apartment, the air felt strange. It was something he couldn't describe, but an unsettling weight sat in his chest. Then it happened. He was just a few streets away from home from when a group of young men jumped him. It was just so sudden. One minute he was unlocking his car door, the next minute fists and kicks rained down on him. "Oga, where your phone? Where your wallet?" One of them barked, shoving a gun in his face. Udo handed over everything without resistance. Then, as if the universe was laughing at him, one of the thieves hopped into his car and sped off. His car, his beloved Toyota Camry, was gone. He was left bruised, robbed, and humiliated, sitting on the roadside like a broken man. When he finally stumbled home, his face swollen, his shirt torn, Nazo screamed again. "Udo, what is happening to you these days?" Udo collapsed on the couch, groaning. "Ha! They stole my car! Oh! What?" Nazo's eyes widened. Udo buried his face in his hands. Something was wrong. Something was terribly, terribly wrong. Two times? Two times he had cheated on his wife, and both times something disastrous happened. Could it be? No, he thought. That was ridiculous, wasn't it? That night, as he lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, one horrifying thought whispered in his mind. What if, what if this is happening because of my infidelity? But he needed proof. And so, like the foolish man that he was, he decided to test his faith again. Udo should have stopped. Any sensible man would have, but not him. Instead, he let curiosity and arrogance guide him into the worst mistake of his life. Two incidents were not enough for him. What if everything that happened were all accidents, he asked himself. The accident, the mob, the robbery, it could just be an unfortunate coincidence. Maybe I'm just simply going through a rough patch. To silence the doubts in his head, he made a reckless decision. He would sleep with another woman, but this time not Jessica. Maybe, just maybe, if he slept with a different woman and nothing bad happened, he could convince himself that this was all in his head, that there was no cause. And so the search began. One Friday evening after work, Udo found himself at a bar, a place he hadn't stepped into in years. He sat in a dimly lit corner sipping his beer, scanning the room for a potential candidate. His heart pounded with guilt, but curiosity pushed him forward. Then he saw her, a young woman with smooth, dark skin, long legs, and a seductive gaze. She sat at the bar, stirring her cocktail, stealing glances at him every few minutes. Udo smirked. Too easy. He took his drink and walked over. "Mind if I join you?" She smiled, and that was all the invitation he needed. Her name was Anita, and she was even bolder than Jessica. By the third drink, she was already touching his thigh, whispering things in his ear that made his blood run hot. That night, Udo followed her. The deed was done, and then he waited. Udo left the hotel room that morning, feeling strangely victorious. See, nothing happened, he told himself as he drove home in a taxi. No accidents, no fights, no robberies. Maybe he had been overthinking it all along until he got home. The moment he stepped his feet into his house, he knew something was wrong. Nazo was sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the floor. Her face was pale, her hands clenched together. Udo's stomach twisted. Baby, are you okay? He asked hesitantly. She turned to him slowly, her eyes brimming with tears. And then she whispered the words that sent ice through his veins. I've been trying to reach you all night. What happened to your phone? Udo, I lost the baby. The room spun. What? His voice barely came out. I woke up in the middle of the night with a strange pain in my stomach. I called you severally, but it won't connect. So I rushed to the hospital. The doctor said, her voice cracked, the baby didn't make it. Udo staggered backward. No, no, this couldn't be happening. His heart pounded violently, his mind racing. Was this? Could this be a punishment? His hands trembled as he reached for his wife, but Nazo pulled away, tears streaming down her face. Just leave me alone, Udo, please. And at that moment, for the first time since his night of betrayals, Udo felt something stronger than guilt. He felt fear, because now he was sure something was wrong somewhere and it was only getting worse. Udo sat outside on the veranda, his head in his hands, drowning in regret. If only I didn't try this nonsense. He had killed his own child. At least, that's what it felt like. He had been foolish, testing fate, playing with fire, and now he was paying the ultimate price. The next morning, Nazo was still bleeding and had to be rushed again to the hospital. When the doctor saw him, he looked at him. I'm sorry I wasn't able to save your baby. Everything happened really fast, so we had to do what we had to do. Udo was speechless. When they came back home hours later, Nazo remained in her room. She had barely spoken to him since she returned from the hospital. She spent most of her time in the bedroom, curled up in bed, crying softly. Every time Udo tried to approach her, she turned away, her silence louder than any insult. Udo, you've lost something precious, a voice in his head whispered. That night, sleep did not come. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Nazo's tear-streaked face and heard the doctor's voice in his mind. I'm sorry the pregnancy could not be saved. By morning, Udo made a decision. He needed answers. Udo was not a superstitious man, but desperation makes a man believe in things he once mocked. He drove to Mama Ekene's house, a well-known spiritualist who lived on the outskirts of town. People said she could see things. He needed her to see what was happening to him. When he arrived, the elderly woman studied him with a piercing eyes. You have come for answers, she said before he could even speak. Udo nodded. Sit down. He obeyed. Mekene took a deep breath and stared into the small calabash of water before her, her fingers making slow circles around it. The room was silent except for the distant sound of birds outside. Then suddenly she gasped. Her eyes widened in horror, and she looked at Udo as if she had seen a ghost. What? What did you do? Udo's heart nearly stopped. Mama, what are you seeing? What is it? He asked, his voice trembling. The old man gripped his wrist tightly. You have been cursed. Cursed? Cursed by who? Udo's voice was rising now. Mama Kene shook her head. Not by a person, but by your own actions. You were blessed with a faithful wife, and yet you chose to betray her. And she is no ordinary woman. She carries the spirit of purity. The gods have marked her, and anyone who dishonors her. She paused, her voice lowering to a whisper, will suffer. Udo's arms were clammy. Mama, please, what can I do? Mama Kene sighed. You have angered forces beyond your understanding. The only way to stop the punishment is to confess to your wife and beg for her forgiveness. If she truly forgives you, maybe, just maybe, the curse will be lifted. Confess? How could he confess? How could he tell Nazo that while she was carrying his child, he was in another woman's bed? She would never forgive him. Mama Ekene leaned closer. Udo, the next punishment will be worse. Udo swallowed hard. He thought he had already seen the worst. But he was wrong. Far worse was coming. Udo left Mama Ekene's house feeling like a man walking towards his doom. Confess. How could he? If he told Nazo the truth, she would never forgive him. His marriage would be over. Maybe there's another way, he muttered as he drove home. But as he gripped the steering wheel, Mama Ekene's warning echoed in his mind. The next punishment will be worse. How much worse? He didn't want to find out. Udo tried to change. He became extra attentive to Nazo, trying to ease her pain, even though Nazo warmed up to him and even had intimate moments with him. She barely ate, she barely spoke, she was drowning in grief, and he had no idea how to pull her out. At work, Jessica noticed the change. Udo, are you okay? She asked one afternoon, sliding into his office with her usual seductive smile. Udo stiffened. For the first time, she repulsed him. Jessica, please just go, he muttered, rubbing his temple. Eh? She laughed. What's wrong with you now? You look like you've seen a ghost. Maybe I have. Please just go, Udo mumbled. Jessica rolled her eyes. Whatever. Let me know when you're fun again, abeg. She swayed her hips as she left. But Udo didn't even spare her a glance. He was done. He had just prayed it wasn't too late. Days turned into weeks and months, and Udo silently prayed that nothing more would happen. He kept looking for ways to confess to Nazo, but each time she saw her grief-looking pale face, the courage in him left. Then it happened. One evening, Udo had stayed late in the office. The thought of how he would tell Nazo filled his mind. He sighed, rubbing his eyes. Maybe tomorrow he would talk to her. Then his phone rang. An unknown number. Hello? Udo answered grudgingly. Good evening, sir. Please, are you Mr. Udo? Yes, who is this? This is from the hospital. We need you to come immediately. It's about your wife. Udo froze. My wife? She's supposed to be at home. Sir, she was just rushed in by your neighbor. She collapsed. Come now. Udo's breath caught in the throat. Please, which hospital? I'm coming now. Udo sped to the hospital like a madman. His hands were shaking as he packed and ran inside. My wife, where is she? Nazo Udo, where is she? He shouted at the receptionist. A nurse led him into a corridor. She's stable now, but we found something concerning, and I think you need to speak to the doctor. Uche's chest tightened. She led him to the doctor's office, where an elderly man in a white coat sat, reviewing a file. Doctor, what happened? Udo demanded. The doctor sighed. Your wife collapsed due to severe stress and malnutrition. Her body has been in distress for weeks, which weakened her system. But that's not what worries me. Udo clenched his fist. Then what? The doctor fixed him with a hard stare. Mr. Udo, your wife is having a baby. But because of her stress and weakness, she is at high risk of losing this pregnancy too. Udo's knees nearly buckled. Another baby? And now this one is also in danger. Tears burned in his eyes. He had already lost one child. He couldn't lose another. Doctor, please, what can I do? He whispered. The doctor leaned forward. Whatever is troubling her, remove it. She needs complete peace of mind. No stress, no sadness. Otherwise, she will lose this child too. Udo swallowed hard. He knew what he had to do. It was time to confess. That night, as he sat by Nazo's hospital bed, watching her pale face, his heart pounded. If she truly forgives you, maybe the curse will be lifted. Could she? Would she? There was only one way to find out. Udo took a deep breath, and then he opened his mouth to speak. Udo's hands were clammy, his heart pounding as he stared at Nazo's frail face. Udo's heart was pounding as he stared at Nazo's frail face. She looked so peaceful in her sleep, her chest rising and falling gently, but he knew the truth inside. He was breaking. He reached for her hand, his fingers barely brushing against her skin. Nazo, I need to tell you something. Her eyelids fluttered and slowly she opened her eyes. Udo, her voice was weak. I'm here, my love, he said softly. She tried to sit up, but he gently held her down. Rest. The doctor said you need to stay calm. Her lips parted slightly, confusion in her tired eyes. Why do you look so afraid? Udo swallowed the lump in his throat because he was afraid. Afraid of losing her, afraid of what his confession would do, afraid that he had already caused an irreparable damage. But he had no choice. Nazo, something has been happening to me, he began. Strange things, bad things, and I don't know that it all started because of what I did to you. Her brows furrowed. What are you talking about? Udo clenched his fists. Nazo, I betrayed you. I haven't been faithful to you. The room fell silent. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came. Udo forced himself to continue before fear made him stop. I slept with another woman. More than once. And after that, everything in my life started falling apart. Those days you were seeing me in torn clothes, and the robbery and the accidents, and now our baby. He choked on the last words, guilt stabbing into him like a knife. I went to a spiritualist. She told me that you're special, that you have a spirit of purity, and any man who betrays you will suffer. Nazo's face was blank, unreadable. I should have known, he continued, desperation creeping into his voice. I should have been faithful. I should have honored you, but I was weak. I was just being a man, and now I've paid for it and dragged you into it. Her breathing grew unsteady. Udo, stop! No, he whispered. I need to finish. The only way to stop this is if you can forgive me. Tears welled up in her eyes. Forgive you? She repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. Udo nodded, his hands trembling. Nazo, please, I'm begging you. I love you. I regret everything. I swear on my life that I will never. Get out! Udo's breath caught. Nazo, please, get out! Her voice rose with a strength that stunned him. Her frail body shook with rage, and for the first time since she lost the baby, fire burned in her eyes. Udo, you did this to me, you did this to our baby, and now you want me to just... Her breathing grew erratic, and suddenly she clutched her stomach. Nazo! Udo sprang forward, but she pushed him away. The heart monitor beeped wildly. The door burst open and a nurse rushed in. Sir, please leave, she ordered. She's under too much stress. Udo stumbled backwards, his head spinning. As he was shoved out of the room, he knew he had just made everything worse. And this time, he wasn't sure if things would ever be okay again. Udo sat outside the hospital, his head in his hands. His world was collapsing, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Nazo hated him. She had every right to. He had broken the one woman who truly loved him. He had begged for forgiveness, but all he saw in her eyes was pain, betrayal, and finality. Was this the end of his marriage? God help me, he whispered. But deep down, he knew he didn't deserve help. As the days passed, Udo stayed away from the hospital and from work. He couldn't face anyone. One afternoon, he got a message from his boss. Udo, come to the office immediately. There's an issue that concerns you. With a sigh, he dragged himself out of the house and drove to work. His body was tired, but his mind was worse. As he stepped into the office, everyone was staring at him. Whispers, side glances, his stomach clenched. Something was wrong. The moment he reached his boss's office, he froze. Jessica was there. Her arms were crossed and her eyes burned with something dangerous. Udo, his boss said coldly, is it true? Is what true, sir? The boss threw a file on the table. Jessica claims you forced yourself on her, that you have been harassing her, and when she refused to sleep with you, you threatened her job. Udo's heart skipped. What? That's a lie. Jessica scoffed, tilting her head dramatically. Liar, she said smoothly. Udo's mouth opened, then closed. He was too shocked to speak. Jessica, he said carefully. You know that's not true. You were the one. Enough, the boss barked. Udo, you are suspended indefinitely while we investigate. You know we don't tolerate any sexual harassment in this office. If these allegations are true, you will be fired and legal actions will follow. The walls around Udo crumbled. Sir, please, get out. Jessica smirked at him as he was escorted out of the office. That was when Udo realized the truth. This was his final punishment. The course wasn't done with him yet. Udo drove home in a daze. Everything was gone. His wife no longer wanted to see him. His child, his dignity, his job had all gone. His hands gripped the steering wheel. What was left of his life? As he reached his house, another horror awaited him. A moving truck was outside. Nazo's things were being packed into it. His heart dropped. He ran inside to find her, supervising the movers, her face blank. Nazo, he shouted. She didn't even flinch. Where are you going? She didn't look at him as she spoke. I'm going away from you. His breath hissed. Nazo, please, don't do this. She finally turned and her eyes were colder than he had ever seen them. You asked for my forgiveness, Udo. He nodded quickly. Yes, and I mean it. She exhaled. I've thought about it. His heart pounded. And she looked him straight in the eye. I don't forgive you. Udo felt like she had been stabbed in the chest. Nazo, please, he whispered, tears forming in his eyes. She shook her head. You cheated on me while I was carrying your baby, Udo. You broke our vow. I have nothing left to give you. She turned to the movers. Please, let's go. Udo watched, helpless as the woman he loved walked out of his life. And for the first time since this nightmare began, he realized this was a punishment he could never escape. Udo stood frozen at the doorway, watching Nazo leave with the last piece of his life. Her back remained straight, her shoulders firm, no hesitation, no second thoughts. The moving truck rumbled to life. She didn't look back. Udo's knees buckled and he collapsed onto the floor. This was it. He had lost everything. Days turned into weeks and weeks turned into months. Nazo was gone and she wasn't coming back. His job was gone. His reputation was ruined. The world moved on without Udo. Jessica, the woman he had risked his marriage for, had disappeared. He later heard that she had resigned and moved to another city. She had only come into his life to destroy it. Udo tried to reach Nazo, but she ignored his calls, blocked him on social media, and even changed her number. She had truly erased him from her life. The house felt empty. Everywhere he turned, there were reminders of her. Her perfume lingering in the air, the tiny notes she used to leave for him on the fridge, the clothes she had forgotten on the wardrobe, and worst of all, the baby room. The tiny crib stood untouched, a painful reminder of what he had lost. Udo would sit in the room for hours, staring at the emptiness, wishing, regretting, but nothing could undo the past. One day, Udo ran into an old friend, Emeka. Guy, you look terrible, Emeka said, shocked. Udo forced a weak smile. Life happened. They sat down for drinks and Udo finally poured out his heart. She won't even speak to me, he sighed. Emeka nodded. You can't blame her. Udo swallowed hard. Do you think she will ever forgive me? Emeka leaned back, rubbing his chin. Udo, it's not about forgiveness, sir. Some wounds don't heal. Some betrayals can't be undone. Udo clenched his fist. But I love her. Emeka gave him a long, pitying look. Love wasn't enough when you betrayed her. Why should it be enough now? The words hit Udo like a punch. For the first time, he truly understood. Some things once broken can never be fixed. Udo spent years to rebuild his life. He got a new job, nothing as prestigious as before, but enough to survive. He became a shadow of his former self. He avoided women, terrified that another betrayal would bring more misfortune. But deep down, he knew the truth. The real punishment wasn't just the accidents, the beating, or even losing his job. The real punishment was losing Nazo. One day, he heard she had remarried. She had moved on. She had found happiness with another man, and that was the final blow. Udo finally realized the curse was never about bad luck. The true curse was knowing he had destroyed the best thing he ever had, and he would live with that regret forever. The end. Wow, what a journey this story has taken us. Udo had everything: a loving wife, a stable job, and a beautiful future. But one moment of weakness, just one, cost him everything. And in the end, he learned a painful lesson. So mistakes can be undone. Oh. Some betrayals leave scars that never heal. This story teaches us that trust is like a glass. Once broken, even if you try to fix it, the cracks remain. Udo thought he could cheat and move on like nothing happened, but life had other plans. His actions had consequences. Once he could never escape. So now, let me ask you, do you think Nazo should have just forgiven him and moved on? Do you believe like people like Udo deserve a second chance, or was his punishment well deserved? And what would you have done if you were in Nazo's shoes? Would you have forgiven Udo? After all, he loved him, like he said. Please drop your thoughts in the comment section. Let's talk about it. And if you love this story, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more gripping tales that keep you at the edge of your seats. Until next time, stay wise and stay faithful. See you in the next one. Bye.